Hi, baby boomer fans. We are Jackie and Janine, the Pfeiffer sisters, and love to talk about the 1950s, inviting you to reminisce with us as we explore experiences of that decade.
We chronicled the distinct memories of our childhood in our book, While the Windmill Watched, a slice of rural America in the 1950s, which takes you on a notably historic journey through that often forgotten decade. We also want to hear about your experiences during the 1950s. We will feature guests whose special stories of that decade will bring to mind magical moments of reflection, some with tears, some with smiles, but above all, a good dose of laughter.
We would like you to chat with us as we bring to mind the sights and sounds so familiar to that time in history. Grab your favorite malt or Green River. Make sure you are wide awake and get ready to be inspired about the 1950s. Welcome to the 1950s Fun Chat. Welcome, friends. It's wonderful to have you join us again on this week's episode of the 1950s Fun Chat. We have another exciting guest to bring to you, to bring her very wonderful memories of growing up in the 1950s. But before we introduce her and bring her into the studio, we'd like to have you notice that in the lower right-hand corner of your screen is a red button that says subscribe. Please subscribe to our channel. We would just love to have you be a regular listener and viewer of the 1950s Fun Chat. And we think that you might get hooked on watching these weekly episodes if you are a subscriber. Jackie, please tell us more.
I will tell you more. First of all, I'll welcome everyone and have you note that there's a banner across the bottom of your screen, whilethewindmillwatched.com. That refers to the little logo up at the top of our screen, and that is a picture of our book, While the Windmill Watched, a slice of rural America in the 1950s. And you'll notice that there's a beautiful North Dakota sunset on the cover, wraps around the front and the back. And this particular book includes so many memories Janine and I have had of living on the northern Great Plains in the 1950s. So check it out. Today, we are really excited to introduce to you a friend of ours from bygone days. Her name is Beverly Thorson Vollmer. She has deep roots in the soil of the Great Plains. Her grandfather, Charles Lyman, and her great-grandfather, Charles Lyman, and her grandfather, Theodore N. Thorson, settled about 1903 in what would become Lyman Township in northern Burleigh County. Now, Bev was born in Bismarck in March 1949. She began her formal education in a two-room country school. The second room was a bedroom for the teacher. Before her fourth grade year, the rural schools consolidated with the Wing Public School District. Bev graduated from Wing High School. She spent some time at North Dakota State University and then decided to accept a marriage proposal from Al. However, Bev returned to higher education later after her children started school, earning a degree from Mary College in 1982. Mary College is now the University of Mary. Bev has had many jobs and vocations, but the Vollmer Angus Ranch that her husband Al and she and their family have built together has been her most rewarding job. Now, Bev is a mother of two, a grandmother of 9, and great-grandmother of 8. That surprised me because when you look at her, she doesn't look a day over some other age. Anyway, Bev has a myriad of hobbies. Sewing, which now is mostly quilting. She started sewing at age 9 and came through the 4-H ranks. Horseback riding, reading, learning, music, especially playing the piano and singing. Bev, Janine and I are so excited to welcome you to the 1950s Fun Chat, and we thank you for joining us.
It's good to be here, and welcome to Vollmer Angus Ranch. It's a beautiful morning as we record this in January. And it's 25 above. The kids are happy, the horses and the guys are happy, so life is good.
Oh, right. So, Bev, we mentioned that music was an integral part of the fiber of the 1950s, at least in rural North Dakota. It seemed as though every venue had a piano, and it was used. So how did music influence your life?
That was an interesting question. I don't know if music influenced my life or if music was a reflection of my life. It was kind of just a part of our being. It was like breathing to us. And I think we expressed ourselves through music. We didn't have journaling back then. So I think, to be able to sing a song, my mother always said she could always tell what kind of mood I was in by the music I was playing on the piano. And I think that has remained true throughout my life. And music has been an important part of life. How it influenced, that's an interesting question that I think I'm going to probably be thinking about for the next week or so.
And Beth, did your parents influence your love of music, or were they musical as well?
Oh, very much so. In fact, it goes way back to the 30s. It starts then, the 30s was tough, and people did what they could with whatever resources they had. And it seemed like music was a big part of this. When my aunt wrote a book called Memoirs, she had a paragraph in here that I thought was so interesting. She said, "We often went to Maury Erickson's and to Moses for hymn singing. Mr. Erickson sang tenor, Uncle Bill bass, Aunt Emily soprano, and Luella. Luella's brothers joined in too, with Mother playing the pump organ. They sang until they lost their voices, had lunch, and sang some more. Francis and I managed to learn how to play the organ well enough so that we could enjoy singing the simpler gospel songs together." So I think, music was always there. They could do that. They could afford it. They had a lot of fun with it. And I'm sure it wasn't the greatest, probably a lot of things that were off key and harmonies that didn't quite mesh, but they enjoyed it, and it was fellowship. And I thought the fact that they had lunch and sang some more spoke to me. Yeah.
Exactly. You know what I think is so interesting is to look at the sheet music that is sitting on your piano. And of course, because some of those pieces of sheet music are exactly what sat on our piano in the 1950s, and we sang them and played them too. The one that I see right on top is Roy Rogers and Dale Evans, and the Bible tells me so. Oh my goodness, we sang that a lot in our home. But it's so interesting because my husband absolutely loves Roy and Dale, and he is impressed that you have that on sitting on your piano. Do you still sing it, Bev?
Do I still what?
Do you still sing that song and play it?
Oh, sure I do. For anybody that's willing to listen or whatever, yeah, we do a lot of those things. The music of the early 50s, and I think the fact that you said that and the fact that your husband who grew up in Iowa, this is, I think we know that it was important in rural North Dakota, but I also have a lot of reason to believe that it was important all across especially the Midwest. We have songbooks from that area, sheet music from that era, and I think that was kind of part of our fiber, was knowing how to sing and knowing how to sing together. Now I started back here. I had my dad's guitar, and when he came home from World War II, he ordered that from the Sears. Excuse me. Oh, geez. He ordered it from the Sears and Roebuck catalog, and I have a copy of the page of the catalog, and it was listed at $24.95. And he taught himself to play, and he did a lot of that we did a lot of singing back and forth together because that was how he was raised. And I have one picture here that you might, I think it'll show it as, Haley, is it showing?
A little bit. It's distant. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not the best picture, but it shows my dad and myself and my brother. And this was kind of our routine on Sunday mornings. It seemed like after Mom had got us all ready for church, there still was some time to kill, and Dad never liked being late, so I'm sure he was nervous. So we always sang, and we sang in the car, and we sang, Skip to My Lou, Billy Boy, all those kinds of things. But that was the singing and the dancing. That was all just part of how we grew up, and how I do believe that rural North Dakota enjoyed all of that.
Tell us about singing in your country school, in your two-room country school.
We did that every morning. We always sang. In fact, all through, the first evening we went to town school, we sang. And I was visiting with my granddaughter this morning, and she was surprised to know that we didn't always have music teachers that came in and just taught that specific thing, that music was taught by the teacher. And so every morning you opened up with the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag, and you sang probably a patriotic song or the Star Spangled Banner, and then you probably sang a few songs, if you didn't know them, out of the Golden Book.
Yes.
And
The gold standard Golden Book.
this was, first copyrighted in 1915, and then in 1923, and in 1946. And I think this book was everywhere. And everybody knew those songs, which made it really fun because then we could sing together out of them. Everybody had a songbook. And I remember my mother-in-law, who taught rural school for several years, was quite, the one thing she complained about is when she went to teachers college, she had to take piano lessons because it was required to teach music. So, and I have her book that she had that had a lot of things in it. And I was kind of, when I found put your little foot, put your little foot, put your little foot. Remember that,
Yes.
Singing in school was important. Everybody knew the Star Spangled Banner. Everybody sang the Star Spangled Banner, whether you had a book, whether you didn't have a book. And the music led to dancing. Who didn't square dance in the 4th, 5th, and 6th grade?
Yes.
I bet you girls did.
We did.
Yeah.
That was kind of part of music and going on and with everything. So we love to sing. I don't remember anybody that really didn't even like to sing. It's just, I guess maybe I just didn't pay attention to them. I'm sorry about that. But it was part of our daily routine, music and singing in the schoolroom. Yes.
Then tell us how that music that was indwelled in you with such a love in the 1950s, how has that influenced the music you share now as an adult?
Well, it probably influenced it too much. Leading music in church, they probably sometimes wish that I would move up to this century. I have a problem with that, because we loved those songs and hymns. I think it's interesting as somebody who observes music a lot, this was a hymnal that was in a lot of churches around here in the early 50s. Both the Congregational and the Lutheran Church had it. But our hymnals at that point only had probably less than 400 hymns in them. And we knew those hymns and we could sing them together. Where today's, the latest Lutheran hymnal to come out has almost 900 hymns in it. And that makes it hard for everybody to kind of really know something. So we kind of lost that core of music that held us together. And of course, if they give me a chance and if they aren't careful, I'm apt to bring that back to the worship service. Maybe a little more than they'd like. But
well, just think how the words of those hymns, the memory of the words of some of those special hymns, encouraged people in their daily tasks, especially if in rural life and the hard work that went into it. I'm sure there were many times of trial and stress in people's lives, just as there are now, but perhaps differently back in the 50s. But how those words could be an encouragement to the woman of the house or the man of the house. They might go about their tasks singing a hymn that would help them get through the day.
Right. And music a comfort,
Yes, definitely.
We were happy and we sang it when we were sad. And I had an interesting theological argument about a lot of that music probably isn't theologically correct, so to speak. But I told that pastor, I said, it's not the words of the music as much as it is maybe remembering grandma singing it or remembering it as a child. It's the memory that it invokes. It's the atmosphere that it gives. It's the attitude. It's the presence of those people that have gone. That's kind of what becomes important to us.
Do you remember the special hymn that was in church, or even Sunday school songs? What were some of the Sunday school songs that you recall?
Oh, climb mountain. Who can make a flower? Hear the pennies dropping. The list is long, and I'll think of more of them about 2:00 in the morning.
Sure. Text us when you do.
Yeah.
Okay. And
Not at 2.
Did your parents sing in church or for events, community events?
No. They weren't performers, just like I'm not.
Okay.
They were not performers, just like I'm not a performer.
Yeah, right.
And but every church had a choir, as I remember it. I mean, I suppose that's a generalization, and certainly not every church, but most churches had a choir, and that was always kind of a fun thing. And sometimes there would be music inspirations at churches, and different choirs would come and share their music, and I remember that as being really fun. And we would have shows and things like that. People shared their music. We knew we weren't the greatest in the world, but we had fun, and there was a message. It was fun.
Yes, yes, definitely. Hey, Bev, can we move on to maybe a different subject? Because I remember when you and I originally talked about having you as a guest on the Fun Chat, we talked about clothing styles of the 1950s versus clothing styles now. And you said something to me that just has stuck in my mind since then in regard to wearing jeans with holes in them. Do you remember what that was?
Yeah, as my granddaughter's laughing, I'm sure. My granddaughter here she's home on Christmas leave from Kansas State University, and she's majoring in communications. So she's helping me with all the technicalities of all these things. And I was really glad to be here this morning. It's great. But yeah, we would have never, ever, ever left the farm with jeans. We wouldn't have even been allowed to go feed the cows in those. That's just kind of how it was. I always laugh. I always think if my mother was walking the streets now and saw some girl walking down with holes in her jeans like that, that girl would have to run for her life, because my mother would have her hogtied, and she would be mending her pants before they would go on her again.
Yes.
Jeans is kind of an interesting revelation. I don't remember wearing jeans in school at all.
Right.
Or
right.
I don't even remember wearing them for every day. I don't remember having a pair of jeans, to be absolutely truthful about the matter, until I got closer to maybe senior in high school. I think we wore a lot of poplin twill type things. But I do not remember the jeans, and I do remember that we wore dresses everywhere, and our mothers wore dresses everywhere. I always you chuckle when you see those ads from the 1950s and how these ladies are in these beautiful figures and these big skirts, and they're washing their clothes. I mean, that definitely would not be in our world today. But that's kind of how it has evolved. There's a lot of styles that are coming around that I think it's kind of funny, because we wore them in the 50s, and now we should probably have some of those clothes again, because
well, how would you like to have been a housewife dressed in a beautiful dress and wearing high heels all day, every day?
Yeah, and I remember people doing that, and I don't know. I sure wouldn't like it, but I would not have liked the pioneer women that came over in those high-starched, high-necked clothes either. So I think we have loosened up a little, and that's for the best.
I've often thought too that the styles of the 50s and the 40s reflected the figures back then, and I think so many of their figures were developed to the hard physical work that they did either in rural North Dakota or in rural America. They were very active with gardens, with keeping their houses, and sometimes even working side by side with their husbands in the field. And maybe we don't have that as much in our culture today as we did back then.
Oh, absolutely not. Nobody does. And I think that we ate foods that were pretty basic, and we didn't know what preservatives were except for mother's canning kind of. So, we had a totally different food. We didn't have a lot of rich things, and we certainly didn't have, if we had caramel rolls on Saturday when Mom baked bread, that was it. And we weren't exposed to all the wonderful things like your bakery and things like that.
Yeah, we didn't. We didn't have those either, Bev. I mean, Mom was a great baker, but she didn't necessarily focus on that all the time. Dad loved homemade bread, and so consequently, we had homemade bread all the time, and it was truly a treat to have bread from a bakery in Bismarck. And the only time that we would have that was if she didn't have time to bake bread that week. And so we'd go to the Dakota Made Bakery on 4th Street, I think it was, in Bismarck. And she would order, do you remember, Jackie, 5 loaves?
Something like that.
Well,
Yes.
anyway, it was on 5th Street.
Okay, 5th Street. And it was Thank you. And it was unsliced bread. And of course, the lady behind the counter would pull out this long sheet of brown paper on this roll, and she would place those 5 loaves on it and wrap it up and tape it. She had a tape dispense, scotch tape. I think it was dispenser right there. That was our kind of our treat. But of course, the best treat was when Dad would decide that, oh, maybe it was time to bring home a few Long Johns or Bismarcks, which we never got otherwise. It seemed like it was usually Dad who was the instigator of those treats that we had.
They were definitely treats, and they weren't part of our everyday fare,
Yes.
along with, the soda drinks. If Dad would go to town and bring home a 6-pack of orange crush,
Yeah.
or root beer, that was something really special.
Yes. Do you remember your mom baking certain types of items for your family? Or was she a meat and potatoes person?
Oh, absolutely potatoes. I can only remember her making one hot dish, and that was the hamburger, macaroni,
Yep.
Mhm.
tomatoes from the garden kind of thing. That's the only hot dish I ever remember her making, and I never remember, even to the day she died, 87. I do not think she ever bought a can of cream of mushroom soup.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
I mean, when I got married, I was introduced to cream of mushroom soup, and I had no idea what that was, and that was way beyond the 50s. So I'm sure that was just never. It was never part of our household.
Yes.
Why would you buy a cream of soup like that when you just made your own gravy, your own stuff?
What did she use as a binder for the meat and macaroni and vegetables? Did she use a cream or sour cream or anything like that?
I would think
Cheese?
so. Yeah, I would think so, and a lot of cheese, definitely. Yep.
And it's so interesting that the term hot dish, we grew up on that term hot dish. And I don't know if it's a northern United States upper Midwest term,
Mhm.
or if it's a term that was used only in that time in the 1950s. I've always called it a casserole after having moved to Iowa, but I think it's so fun because I've been to plays. See, what is it called? The church basement ladies. Have you seen
Yes.
any of them? Oh, and they talk about hot dishes, and I just get such a kick out of that when I hear it, because it's a term I haven't heard for a long time. But it's a well-loved dish that is made from the heart, and sometimes you use the ingredients you have on hand. Sometimes you open those bags of freezer corn or the tomatoes that you preserved, and the meat from that was in your freezer because of your own beef that you raised, and you made a great meal or something to take to a funeral reception or even then. But so the foods, I think, from the 50s, some have changed, some have not changed, and yet they're all still really good.
Oh,
Mhm.
absolutely. But the 50s had an advantage that nobody, with their moms mostly being at home, having a quick meal probably wasn't the ultimate goal.
Right.
Because, most of the time, except if they were helping outside or whatever, they were in the kitchen. So they could be watching some beef tips that were, beef cooking, like that.
Mhm.
The
So,
time
Bev, okay, Bev, I was going to change the subject now. You only went to your school, country school, for 3 years, but is there something that stands out about it, negative or positive? How many were in your class? How many were in your first, second grade class?
there was 2 of us.
Well, there were 2. Okay.
Yeah.
Mhm.
My cousin Stephen Thorson. I loved, it was fine.
Mhm.
I got a lot out of the older kids' classes because I was a pretty good reader even when I started school, and so I would listen a lot to what was happening in the other classes. And I have kind of a fun story, which maybe is a little egotistical, but the first grade teacher was teaching 4th grade history, and she asked them a question about where was George Washington. I still remember to this day, where was George Washington's home? What was it called? And nobody knew the answer. And Mrs. Pelayo said, Beverly, what was the name? And I said, Mount Vernon. So for that,
She had your number.
yeah, in that way, it was kind of an advantage. And I think our outdoor recesses were, of course, probably what you really remember. anti-over and sliding, waxing the slide and things like that and falling off. And the games we played, because there was no such thing as discrimination for either age or gender, everybody played, and you all played together. And of course, the singing, back to that, and programs we put on and things like that. So,
did your country school, come to the Arminokan School for the Burleigh County Play Days in the spring?
Yep.
Oh.
I know we did once, but then I don't remember. I know we went to Wing too.
Okay.
So some people that had better memories than I would know that kind of stuff. I always ended up like everything anyway, so I didn't pay a whole lot of attention to that stuff.
Okay. Jackie, can you just briefly mention to our audience what our play day was, what the Burleigh County Play Day was?
Our play day consisted of no school, first of all, and it was usually the last week of May, because our school in North Dakota usually was dismissed the last week in May. And country schools, and at that came together for contests in the morning, such as a math contest, a spelling bee, etc. And then we had athletic games in the afternoon. So there would be the three-legged race, the potato sack race, high jump, low jump, a softball game, things such as that. And from what I remember, it was only the schools along the Highway 10, Minokan, McKenzie, Sterling, and Moffat.
Oh.
Any more? I don't know. I don't think Bristol came, but just those schools.
Okay.
So,
and then
go ahead, Bev.
To finish that thought, you will be happy to know that they still have a Burleigh County Play Day.
They do? Where's it located?
All the elementary schools in the rural area come together. The rural schools. I don't think Bismarck, Haley, not Bismarck schools, but all Wing, Sterling, everybody in the county come together, and they still have their play day. Except now they have it in the big sports complex at BSC, which is quite phenomenal.
Okay.
Oh my goodness.
Did you in Wing High School, did you have your own high school graduation exercises, or were you a part of a larger school?
No, there was 16 of us in my class, and I think about 20 in Alan's class. So we always had our own, and that tradition has continued. When Haley graduated, there was 4, and still kind of hung on a little bit, So when these girls go to college and somebody talks about small schools, they usually can kind of ring the bell on. They're probably from one of the smallest.
Okay. Is Wing High School still going, or are they consolidated?
They're consolidated for sports, but not for academics.
Okay. And with whom are they consolidated?
Well, in some sports, and with some sports, they are with Wilton.
Okay. Oh. Okay. Bev, it's getting about to the end of time with our chat, and I know this went too quickly, but I have 2 questions in mind. What from the 1950s really has influenced your life now as a grandma and a great-grandma and a wife of a rancher?
I think appreciation of simple things, because we grew up in a time where our parents came home. My dad was a World War II veteran. They had survived the Depression. They had survived a war, and they were looking for things to be simple and good. And I think they were quite conscientious. They didn't want about how they spent their money. And I think some of those things kind of still sort of resonate in my head a little bit. That those things are important, and it's not about how much jewelry you can wear or things like that. Because I think in the early 50s, people had a lot of money. They didn't flaunt it. It was everybody was respected what they had and valued it.
And then, if there is one fun memory that comes to mind from the 1950s, what would that be?
Well, I had to think about that a little bit, but it didn't take me too long. In 1957, my dad and mom loaded up the car, and we went on a trip during Christmas vacation to Disneyland.
Oh, wow.
Lucky you.
That was just phenomenal, because I was a huge Disneyland fan. One of my regrets of life is that at one point I had sent away on a cereal box 50 cents for the original Mickey Mouse ears, and then still had. And Lord, if I had those now, I could just have a really nice vacation someplace. But fond of that, and we had such a great trip, and it was so much fun seeing the world. And I think that even almost became a little bit influential on my life. That when I thought back about it, that Dad was not afraid to go someplace, and he had a curiosity of things that he wanted to see. He was always wanting to know what was over the next hill. He always loved driving a road he had never driven before. And surely those are things that I think that as a child probably influenced me.
Cool. Bev,
Yeah.
we just thank you so much for joining us today and sharing part of your life stories especially from the 1950s. Thank you. And we know that there will be so many of our viewers and listeners who will just treasure the opportunity to listen to this. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for writing the book, because that I think has triggered a lot of memories, and it's been kind of a fun journey. So thank you.
Good. You are welcome. It's really been a project. Our book has been a project that has grown, and we've seen opportunities to help others, or give opportunities to others to share their stories of the 1950s also. That's why we started this Fun Chat, because baby boomers love to talk about that time. It's really kind of fun. So next week, we will have another guest on our 1950s Fun Chat. But until then, you let your mind wander to that cool time when of cool cars, poodle skirts, and soda jerks.
And be sure to click on that red subscribe button, as well as the thumbs up icon. So do tell your friends, even your relatives, about the 1950s Fun Chat. And do join us every week, Monday, 8 p.m. Central. And if you can't join us at that time, view our YouTube program found at the 1950s Fun Chat.
And you can learn more about We Fight for Sisters at our website, whilethewindmillwatch.com. And that will tell you all of, well, not all about us, Jackie, right? But a lot is there in relation to our life in the 1950s. Also, if you're interested in having a copy of our book, While the Windmill Watched, A Slice of Rural America in the 1950s, you can order it at that website, either through our international distributor, the NDSU bookstore, or a variety of other vendors who sell our book that you will see posted on our website. So remember, that's whilethewindmillwatched.com. We've had so much fun today, and we hope that you have too. See you next time on the 1950s Fun Chat. Bye-bye.
And I want you to know we appreciate and thank each and every one of you, our viewers. Toodaloo.